Alrighty, so it's 1 o'clock now, so I guess we can get started. Um, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rottnek here. We know him from our clinical interviewing course earlier in M1 year, and he's taken some time out of his day, which we're really appreciative of, to answer some of our questions. So I'll hand it over to our interviewers to start it off.
All right, hello, I am Erin, and me and Aman will be conducting the interview today. So can we just start, Dr. Rottnek, with some background on how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Native St. Louis guy, grew up here. Spent most of my life here except for college, which was at Furman University in South Carolina. My parents are both first and second generation immigrants, grew up in South City. I'm the first in the family to go to college, followed by my brother, first in the family on either side go to college. And then my brother followed not in my footsteps, but in a similar non-traditional pathway. And he's an addiction psychiatrist in New York, which is kind of funny. After college, went through my medieval years, which I call them that because I had major depression, but back in the 80s, we didn't know how that showed up all the time. So I had a full ride to Harvard for bioorganic chemistry after undergrad, left there after a month, came back to St. Louis, taught high school chemistry for 2.5 years. Then was going to be a Jesuit. 8 days in the novitiate, came back with the second major depressive episode. Finally saw a psychiatrist. Prozac was new then. Went to the sliding scale resident clinic at Barnes. Got some treatment therapy for some years. Decided what I wanted to do with myself. And I knew that for me, I never thought I was going to be a physician. I always thought I'd be a teacher. And then realized I want something that my values, something to work with folks who don't have great resources. If a hobby is usually a second job, so I knew I wanted it to be important. I wanted to be my own boss. Wanted to be able to live where I wanted to live, which wouldn't have been the case necessarily in academic chemistry. So I thought about medicine and taught myself anatomy and physiology and a few other things I didn't have as a prereq. Ended up applied to WashU and St. Louis U. I'm glad I didn't get accepted at WashU because I would have been an odd fish out of water there. Got accepted at St. Louis U. Got involved in homeless healthcare right off the bat in my first year. Decided on family medicine. Even though I was 90% sure coming in that I was going to go into psychiatry just because of my experience and my family's issues, realized I didn't want to lose all my clinical skills, and I wanted to be myself. And you can't always do that in psychiatry. And ended up doing my residency program here at Deaconess, which no longer exists. What's left of it is a big prairie for the zoo right now at 40. Our program now in family medicine, St. Mary's and family care, is kind of the new version of what I went through in terms of a community-oriented programming. During my third year, well, actually after my residency, I did a year of faculty development fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill, which was cool. The internet was new then in the late 90s, and fortunately that was part of our training. And then my boss was approached by the county health department to staff the 3 county health centers with family docs. So we started doing that. After a year into that, the doc at the jail resigned at the county jail in St. Louis County, and that was my beginning of a 15-plus year sentence in the St. Louis County Jail, 3 days a week. The other times mostly spent teaching. During those 15 years, I switched over with a contract from my previous employer to St. Louis U. Became a full-time faculty member at St. Louis U in 2008. and subsequently became director of community medicine. Left correction in 2016 when the then county executive wanted to privatize care there to a for-profit company, and I kind of made a stink about it in the press, St. Louis Public Radio and the Post-Dispatch. So I kind of got disinvited to return the contract year. We still have the contract, but another doc does that. That was around the time that addiction medicine got approved as its own specialty by the American Board of Medical Specialties. And I got contacted by one of the agencies trying to build more fellowships around the country. I started working on that in 2016, and then by 2020, January 2020, so the academic year 2019-2020, we had our first fellow, and our fellowship had established at St. Louis U. And that's where our addiction medicine program started. So right now, my life has always been, my professional life has always been a collection of different things. I've never practiced in flu care, but right now 30% of my time is contracted to ARCA, which is Assisted Recovery Centers of America, which is the largest private practice that does addiction work, and also the largest partner of the State Department of Mental Health for those services. And then 20% of my time is teaching. Another 15% is as addiction medicine program director. And then the rest of my time are other sponsored work and research, working with the state opioid response team and doing having some contracted work with the Center for Health Law Studies in the law school, where I have a secondary appointment, and I have a lot of fun working with them over there.
That's awesome. I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into addiction medicine. So, what should medical students know about your specialty in addiction medicine? And I might add some follow-up questions afterwards.
Sure. As I mentioned, addiction medicine is a pretty new specialty, but now it's got the same standing as a subspecialty as, say, that ENT or cardiology have with internal medicine. The interesting thing about addiction medicine is it's a fellowship, a training program of 1 year, and then your successful completion of that, you can sit for boards. So to enter the specialty, you can be board certified or board eligible if you haven't taken your board exam yet in any specialty in medicine. So a cool thing that in our program, so far, all of our fellows have been mid-career docs willing to take a year off, give it to us for a year of training and a huge salary cut, learn the skill sets around addiction medicine. So we've had family doc, ER, OBGYN, internal medicine, and our fellow this year is a pediatrician. So in addiction medicine, you learn the meds, of course, but you also learn the skill sets, the interviewing skills, motivational interviewing. You learn how there's opportunities for work in addiction in all the different specialties. Perhaps focus most on our new consult service at SLU Hospital, psychiatry, maternal fetal medicine, and virtual care at ARCA. So it's, like I said, it's a 1 year program where you learn those skills, inpatient, outpatient, and some of the different modified treatment programs that are available in addiction medicine.
So I know you mentioned that in this fellowship program, you have docs from like all over, but are there any stereotypes that are associated with physicians that work in addiction medicine in your eyes?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, when it was, there were a lot of the docs who have done work in addiction, but maybe didn't complete a fellowship before they were developed, are docs with their own history of substance use. And that's really cool because people can bring their whole experience to the work. The other thing that's really interesting is that a lot of people doing this work in addiction, especially since before it's been trying to be regulated more, a lot of the work was really bad. And I know most physicians don't say, yeah, our specialty really sucked, but the work really was bad. I mean, people were doing things like doing non-evidence-based practices. They were doing things to make more money, having patients come back and charging them exorbitant fees for urine drug screens and you name it. So those are some of the stereotypes. What's really interesting about who's being drawn to addiction medicine now as a new specialty, the number one specialty is family medicine docs who are doing an extra year of training, followed by psychiatry, followed by internal medicine. And a lot of the folks who are doing this are like typical fellows. They're right out of residency. So it's like finish residency on June 30th, start addiction medicine fellowship July 1st. Our program at SLU is really attracting this different type of person, people who have practiced medicine, and all our docs have practiced for 15 to 20 years. And they have noticed working with patients in their field that they see a real need to learn how to work with folks with substance use disorder and really getting the skill sets they need because they're seeing the bad outcomes that can happen that lead patients to their doorstep. So it's been kind of fun in our program at SLU. I wasn't sure if we were going to have a fellow for this July. I'm 95% sure that we will. But this is another doc who comes to us 3 years out of training, so I said he'd be the baby of the program. But he's been doing hospitalist work in Springfield, Illinois. And he said that he's really noticed how many people he sees in the hospital with a primary diagnosis related that was exacerbated by alcohol use, opioid use, meth use, et cetera. So yeah, so we're young enough that we don't have many stereotypes yet, so we'll have to see what the future holds.
Additionally, like, do you mind talking a little bit about the patient population? I'm sure it's a very diverse, and do you think dealing with that diverse patient population is a challenge? Or if there are any other challenges you'd like to talk about?
Sure. As you can imagine, as a jail doc, I'm used to a diverse patient population because after I finished my time in fall of 2016 at the county jail in July of 2020, I became the medical director of city juvenile detention. So I've never stayed far away from corrections. So for me, I love diverse patient populations. I like working with people that may not have been treated well within a healthcare system. And what's interesting now about the program that we're building at St. Louis U is each time we build a program, we're almost contacting a different patient population. And I'll give you an example. At ARCA, where I've been for almost 5 years now, and we have 4 St. Louis U docs, all part-time, but 4 docs there now, all board certified. Most of our patients, though not all of them, are their treatment's either paid for by the state or Medicaid. So we're working with folks with few resources. We do a lot of work helping address some of the social and structural determinants of health that they face in a negative way. We do a lot of work with housing, job training, parenting, et cetera. When ARCA got started in 2001, it was kind of the exact opposite. ARCA started off as a very, very small practice, taking care of mostly physicians, lawyers, and other specialty folks like pilots who, of course, can fly if they have a substance use disorder. When ARCA started, almost all their clients were self-pay. So our big practice at ARCA, where we have over 3,000 active patients at any given time, mostly state funded, but we also developed a sister practice called QSR, and that's been around for about 4 years. That caters to folks with traditional employer-based insurance, United Healthcare, Cigna, Aetna, et cetera. So those folks are folks that have insurance connected to their work. And then every once in a while, we'll still get a patient coming in with private pay. But all of that really speaks to the diversity of the work. Now, this fall, Dr. Hilmer, Amy Hilmer, she started a consult service at St. Louis U Hospital, just 2 half days a week. but those 2 half days a week have gotten very busy. So that probably will be expanding very quickly. But so everybody who gets to St. Lucie Hospital gets drawn into that. And then another population that we really want to expand into is working more with pediatric patients at Cardinal Glennon. We have some adolescent patients through our work at ARCA with some local counseling programs, but there's a lot of work to be done in prevention, education, harm reduction, and even treatment with the adolescent population. So that'll hopefully be one of our next areas of expansion.
And then going back a little bit to your process of discernment along your career path, I know there were a lot of different things, but how ultimately did you know that this was the right specialty for you? Did you have some sort of aha moment, or was it more of like a gradual thing?
I did have an aha moment when it came to choosing family medicine. And also kind of even before that, choosing my patient population. When I was a first year med student, we had these things called mini electives. And my mini elective was working with an organization that doesn't exist anymore in St. Louis called Healthcare for the Homeless. And I was able to shadow docs and work with them at area homeless shelters where they kind of set up impromptu clinics. Well, I ended up picking up that work in my 4th year and then doing that for 6 years continuously as a volunteer. But I remember when I was a first year med student, meeting some of these folks at the shelters and helping them with paperwork and doing this. And it reminded me so much of the context in which I grew up in, because my parents had a family business, wholesale hardware and Formica and stuff like that. So I literally grew up in my parents' warehouse. And we had a lot of folks there, and, drivers, people who pick things up, distributors, workers, who were not highly educated. Life was challenging, sometimes challenging at home. And something really clicked for me when I was working with folks in the shelter. And something told me that's the kind of population I want to have as part of my work. Family medicine, what clicked for me was 4th year, because when I was a student, I graduated in 95 from SLU. We still didn't have a department of family medicine. So I had to use my elective time in my 4th year to do family medicine rotations. One of the docs I worked with at the time, and that was at the old Family Care Health Center, he knew that I had taught high school, and he knew I liked teaching. So after we would see a patient, he would make the diagnosis, he'd leave me behind to explain the treatment plan with the patient. And that's when it really clicked for me that that's what I really love, is talking to patients, helping them make good health decisions in real life. Like what's something you can do considering your resources, where you are, et cetera. And that's when I decided against doing my med-peds interview, which we still had at the time at SLU, and because med-peds at the time was very focused on inpatient care, and realized I want to be out in the community doing that work. And then when the time came for addiction medicine, and I knew I was making a transition from the jail, I realized I've been doing addiction medicine my whole career. So it just makes sense. This is a new opportunity to fulfill a real need of the community. And that just made sense for me to follow along.
So this is a more of a higher level question, just more general. So if listeners are curious about these two specialties, they get more context. But how would you describe the difference between something like psychiatry and addiction medicine? Because on face value, they seem pretty similar, but obviously are, very different in many ways.
Right. And someone in your generation asked that question because you think it seems similar. And I wish people in my generation felt the same way. For the longest time, most psychiatry training programs did nothing with substance use disorder. And to this day, our residents in family medicine do a whole lot more with working with folks with substance disorder than our residents do in psychiatry. we're working on changing that, and Dr. Hilmer is changing that, which is cool. But you would think the two are interrelated, because I think the two are interrelated, and I've been doing this my whole life. But for the longest time, working with folks with addiction, whether it's substance use or things like gambling, compulsive sex, internet addiction, you name it, binge eating, which is now considered an addiction as well. Those things traditionally, those diagnoses have been siloed out, and traditional medicine did nothing with them. You'd have to go off to some treatment program somewhere if you were lucky enough to find one. And that's why now, with Dr. Hilmer starting the addiction medicine consult service, that's a game changer at our hospital, because in the past, what you would do in an acute care setting is that you might help somebody detox off of alcohol, but if somebody had alcohol use disorder, physicians would typically say, well, go find a post-step program or go find an AA program. And I still work with, do a lot of talks to societies, and a lot of physicians my age don't know there's treatments for alcohol use disorder medication-wise. So it's nice to hear you asking this question, because your mindset, not only is it my mindset, which of course makes it valid, but it shows a change in how students see addictive disorders. Because in the past, it was because people were dumb, stupid, lazy, evil, you name it. And we kept folks at arm's distance in medicine. Now people in medicine are realizing there's a biological basis for this, which is why I love working with all of you medical students to help educate you about that and reinforce that at different points in your education.
This is switching gears a little bit, but how do you prioritize your hobbies at the same time as being a physician and being so busy all the time?
Okay. I am the last person you want to talk to about work-life balance. I'll say it right out. I had relationships in the past. I've had 2 long-term relationships. I've been single for over 12 years now. And yes, I'm a crazy cat lady. I'm going to say it's a gender-inclusive term, okay? I find great joy at this point in my life in service and teaching and getting things done. And because I was that nerdy kid growing up, it was always like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my career? What am I going to do to help people? I still have nightmares about that. You guys will too. If you haven't yet, you'll be 30 years older from now and worrying about the exam you forgot about. So that's always my nightmare thing. So for me, I would say I work hard and nap hard. So I'm usually up doing something. But when I don't, the day off means I get a nap in. And then I have different things that are, like for me, some people for creativity, they love a hobby. For me, it's working on a paper, working on a lecture, working on opioid litigation that I'm involved in right now, working with the law school on the state model law that kind of stretches different parts of my brain to figure out how do we get policy involved in that. I might get a hobby sometime, but maybe in my 70s, so we'll get back to that. So in the meantime, I have house plants. I cook once in a while.
And in terms of your job, if you had to pick your favorite part about it and maybe your least favorite part about it, something you don't like as much, what would you say those are?
None of the deans are listening, so I'll tell you this. Meetings that don't need to happen, okay? There are so many things that are done in medical education, and it's not just St. Louis U, it's everywhere. You guys had me in clinical interview, and you know that I see there's no reason to pull people together unless they are together because it's necessary, right? There's so many meetings that we have to do in academia that are done because they've always been done that way. If it's passive information, send me an email. Don't make me go to a meeting and waste time. That and charting. Charting is a safe answer, okay? Every physician will say, I hate charting. Okay, good. Nobody likes that. What do I enjoy the most? One, teaching to people who really want to learn, which is oftentimes for me trekking down to St. Francis County or Washington County, Missouri, like I did last month to talk to first responders about what is naloxone and Narcan do. Or it's working, like right now, working on writing a state model law with one of the law faculty to bring community pharmacists to the treatment team to allow people to go to a community pharmacy, get started on use disorder. Things that take up the system and find new ways to get services and care to people. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. And the last thing I'll say that I enjoy is one advantage of aging in place with like-minded folks is you get to know people. And I say probably 50% of my work life is introducing folks to each other by email. It's like somebody might be working on substance use policy here, and somebody over here is an expert on the impact of the opioid use disorder on pregnant women, and having them introducing them to each other so that they can work together on a project, right? Today down at ARCA, we met with one of our state senators, Carla May, who toured our place down at ARCA because we want to build out the second floor of the building into a triage site and to do IV fluids and all that to get people started on treatment a lot faster. And now we have an advocate on the blue side of the aisle in Jeff City in the Senate and the red side of the aisle in the Senate in Jeff City. So building those connections to help people talk to each other to get good work done, I think is probably another favorite part of my job.
Looking back, is there anything you wish you did differently during medical school?
This is what I was thinking about this morning because I reviewed the questions before I went down to ARC, and I thought, there's two things I came up with. One will tell you just how different medical school was for me in St. Louis than it was for all of you. We went to class, like typically the day started at 8 or 9 and went to 4 or 5. And we were in class all that time. First 2 years, right? And then we often took exams on Saturdays. Okay? What you have now is incredibly different and much better. Because we go to classes and we have people in basic sciences talking about their research project. What does that have to do with medicine? Maybe a little bit. So what I used to say, but I would never say in front of the class now, is I wish I had in front of class so long. Because literally, I went to class every day. We had note service back then where lectures were recorded, audio recordings, and students would take turns transcribing them. I never took note service. I was one of 3 students who didn't in a class of 110. Because I went to class and I took notes. And the other thing I learned at the end of my second year, take my textbook to class. So if lecture was useless, I could always catch up on my textbook. So that was one thing I changed. Now for students today, it's like the flip side. It's like, no, you need to come to class to talk to each other and for most classes, at least I know there's still some that need some help, but in terms of interacting with each other and with social skills. But the other thing I wish I had done differently was I wish I would have had more confidence in myself and in the process that I was going to get where I needed to be at the end of 4 years. And I know looking back, a lot of that for me was imposter syndrome because being the first in the family to go to college, you know, I didn't have help with college from my family, much less med school, right? Other than my parents being it into me to be an extremely good doctor because that's what you've chosen, so you better be good at it. So I think if I could have taught myself to chill a little more, that would have not probably been a good thing.
And then going off of that a little bit, for med students today, either interested in family med or addiction medicine in specific, are there any resources or any things that you would recommend that they do now, whether it's in the preclinical years or once they start clinical rotations?
Sure. One is, don't expect to stay in the same specialty that you think you're going to go into. So, and I say that not in a bad way, but as opposed to what I always say, be a sponge, especially during the first 3 years. Pay attention to everything around you and all the different specialties. You'll learn and once you get into the third year, you'll find the things that bring you joy. Like if you want to do procedures, you'll know that. More surgery than psychiatry, right? If you want to see patients for follow-up and for continuity, get to know them well. You're going to do primary care more than you're going to do ER, right? You'll learn that stuff. If there's specialties you're really interested in, though, like let's say family medicine and psychiatry and addiction, almost all professional sites for specialties have special information for med students. I know the American Academy of Family Physicians does, AAFP, and so does the American Society of Addiction Medicine. They have things for students too. Take a look at the online resources available, because it's everything from surveys to look to see if that's a good fit for you, to lots and lots of scholarship opportunities. For med students and for residents, family medicine also being a relatively new specialty, 1969 is still relatively new in medicine. There's lots of scholarship opportunities where organizations will pay your way and also the hotel room, et cetera, to go to conferences, to go to regional conferences, to go to national conferences. Usually those opportunities will include you submitting your CV and a statement of, a letter of intent. Why are you interested? And maybe a letter of support from a faculty member. A good example of things I sent out this year for everybody was the Hazelden Betty Ford program, the Summer Immersion for Medical Student program. One organization in addiction medicine, the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, takes about 175 students from all over the U.S. every year, pays your complete everything for you to go to either Minneapolis, an area, someplace in Oregon, or Rancho Mirage, California, which is next door to my happy place, which is Palm Springs. They put you up for a week. You spend 60 hours, sometimes classes, but mostly working directly with treatment teams and following patients through care. So there's lots of that in all of the specialties right now to really look at ways to explore. And then also now with Zoom stuff, there's lots of virtual opportunities. So if there's things you want to learn more about, get outside of your comfort zone a little bit and apply for some of these opportunities to learn more. And even if you end up not in the specialty you thought you were with, it's extremely important in medicine, and we don't talk about this nearly enough, but you need to know what other specialties do so that if you are, say, in primary care, you need to know how and when to refer a patient to a specialist, a subspecialist, and educate your patient on what to expect and how to prepare. If you're some super duper subspecialist, you need to know how primary care systems work so you can interact the other way. So always be very open to paying attention, not only to the content of the specialty, but when you're a med student, pay attention to the lives of the residents you work with, their temperament, what they find joy in, what they don't find joy in. Sometimes the attending same way. Ask some questions about what they like about their work and what they don't. And that will help you really clarify your specialty choice as well.
That finishes up with the questions that we had. So wanted to thank you again, Dr. Rottnek, for coming in here and answering our questions. But if there are any questions that attendees have, feel free to ask. Either type it in the chat or just unmute.
On a day-to-day basis, what's something that you look most forward to with your job?
I'd say one of the things that I love the most is when I have collaborative projects. Like right now, Dr. Everard, we're from clinical interviewing. We're doing a small funded research project, interviewing guys at our transitional living house on why they are going from one form of medication to the other. And I've really learned to enjoy doing research projects more because, like many students still in medical school, we get introduced to research the wrong way. We get introduced by tagging onto somebody else's lab or research question, right? What's fun where I am right now is learning to ask questions that spring from my experience in the field and then figuring out a way to turn that into a research question and then figuring it out. And what's fun about not only my preference now, but also what works well is the interprofessional approach to asking a research question and then how to answer it. So I'd say that's part of what I really like. And then the other part is working with members of the community in St. Louis with safety net organizations on how to further work around health and racial equity, issues of anti-racism, issues of access to care, and to create a healthier community. And I think those are areas that I'm really in right now that I really enjoy a lot. And the other fun thing about all those is that I'm usually not driving. Research, sometimes I'm the PI, but on the community stuff, sometimes it's me just adding those magic initials behind my name to a board or to a project or to a planning event where other people are leading who should be leading, like Black leaders, especially I've worked with a lot of Black women who come from St. Louis and lead from St. Louis. And it's such a pleasure to be able to support their work with whatever I can contribute. That's a real source of joy for me.
You.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending this Physician Pathway session. And thank you again, Dr. Rottnek.
My pleasure. I'm glad you're doing this. I hope you find the conversation useful today. But I'd say the big thing is these big sponges for a while and give yourself the space to consider opportunities that you may not have had before. And don't feel like you need to have all the answers right now.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rottnek. We really appreciate it, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.